Just waiting on beeper guy here. Beeper guy has not showed up yet, so I don't know if we can go or not. Maybe I should wait for beeper guy? I don't know, I'm kind of lost without him at this point. Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Please hit the like button. My wife is dictating her answers on the comment section there, and it obviously, her and Siri don't get along very well. It doesn't listen to her, or else Siri's had a little too much apricot schnapps tonight. I'm not sure which one that is, but anyway, thank you for being a part of the Hot Zone live broadcast tonight. It's been an interesting broadcasting day already because I was right in the middle of my CBN broadcast, and I said, hey, let's answer some questions, and it just went and just cut off, and I hadn't even touched anything yet. So I don't know what happened there. Let's hope that my software runs correctly here, but pray for the ghosts in the machine, I guess. Anyway, thank you very much for hitting the like button or the like button, whichever one you like. And thank you for being a part of the podcast. We're going to talk about some immigration topics tonight because while everything else is going on around the world, the United States is being absolutely overrun with illegal migrants. And not just the United States. There are lots of places around the world that have similar problems, and many of them are not getting a lot of play in the media. So we'll talk about that, but we'll also, don't worry, never fear, we'll give you an update on what's happening here in Israel as well. Today we went down to En-Gedi. I took my wife and my kids down there to En-Gedi, and very nice, very, very nice. I had not been there before. Cool to see places that you read about in the Bible. And so I really like, especially finding places. Now they're a little more arcane. I've been to the big ones over here. Been to the Garden Tomb, and I've been to the Garden of Gethsemane, and places like that. But to go find a little more arcane areas that you read about in the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, stuff like that, to me is very interesting, and I really enjoyed it today. So I've got a little bit of time tonight to finish this broadcast, and then I'm going to have to go do some more work on Newsmax. So hope you can, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them up and I'll answer them. In the meantime, let's talk for a little bit about the migration issue. The reason I wanted to touch on that is because we just this week saw the highest single day ever in history of illegal crossings of the U.S. southern border. Something like 9,000 people in a day, one day. We have now, the number of people coming across the U.S. southern border is somewhere along the lines of two Fayetteville, North Carolinas, or a city the size of, like, I don't know, maybe Cleveland. 200,000 to 400,000 people in a day is absolutely unbelievable. And it's so much that it's absolutely overwhelming the capacity of the Border Patrol to even register all those people, not to stop them, not to patrol the border. They've stopped doing that a long time ago. They've been the welcome wagon ever since Joe Biden got into office, but rather than the Border Patrol. The only patrolling they do is to pick up more migrants who are turning themselves in, to say nothing of all the migrants who aren't turning themselves in, who are just crossing the border and walking into our country. But the thing that's not getting as much reporting, you're probably seeing a lot of reporting on the U.S. southern border right now because it's an absolute crisis. But what you're not hearing a ton about is that the mix of people coming into the United States is slowly changing. It used to be mostly Mexicans, and they were coming across for economic reasons, and they came across because they could make more money in the United States working in the fields or whatever, get a legit job, and send that money home or carry that money home to their families. There are some reasons why that's not great for the United States, but it's not anywhere near as bad as what we're seeing now. The shift started to take place probably in the Obama administration, where we started to see more people that were coming not with short-term economic interests in mind, where they were just crossing the border to work for a season and then take or send that money back home to their families. Now they're crossing because they're coming to take advantage of the programs that the United States has available. They're not coming to get jobs. Many of them don't want jobs and don't feel like they need jobs, because you have to understand, in most of Latin America, most of the world indeed, you cannot get paid if you don't work. They don't have things like unemployment. They don't have things like SNAP benefits or welfare or anything like that in many, if not most, countries around the world. They don't have things like free education for your children, where you can just send your kids off to school and you don't have to think about it again. You don't have to pay anything. They don't have that in Latin America. In public schools in Latin America, which are compulsory, people have to go. I mean, your kids have to go to school, but you have to pay for it, not always in the form of tuition per se, but in the form of your kids' books, your kids' uniforms, your kids' pencils and erasers and chalk for the teacher's chalkboard, and everything, their lunches, everything has to be paid for by the parents. That's how it works in Panama. And so the idea that you could come to the United States, walk right in the door, sign up for state and local and government programs and NGO programs, and end up making more money than you could have ever made working an actual job in your home country, and send your children to school for free, zero, and if you get sick or hurt, you just go to the hospital and they have to treat you, even if you don't have any money to pay. In Latin America, it doesn't work like that. They stop you at the door to the hospital and say, "What's wrong with you?" And you go, "I cut my hand off with a machete." And they go, "Okay, cut your hand off with a machete. Let's see, that's $15. Pay here, please." And you have to pay before they let you in the door. They don't, if you're like, "Well, I don't have any money," they're like, "Well, sorry, sucks to be you." That's just how it works. And so the idea that I could go to the hospital and if I don't have money, they still have to treat me is amazing to people from around the world. Now, most of us who were born and raised in America, got a job, went to school, paid our taxes, just your normal middle class people, we would never consider that we could go to the hospital and not pay and they would still treat us. Well, I mean, that might happen. There have probably been times in many of our lives where you've gone to the hospital for an emergency or you're sick or whatever, and you don't have enough money to pay the bill, but they send you a bill and you're stuck paying that bill every month until you get it paid off. They might forgive some part of it if you're super poor or whatever, but you're going to be in debt to the hospital for the rest of your life. But for illegal immigrants, it doesn't work that way. They just simply don't pay it. And they have to be treated. So that is an epidemic that is not getting a lot of press in our country, but it is an epidemic nonetheless. Talk to anybody who works in an emergency room anywhere in the country, and they'll tell you, we have migrants that show up all the time for everything. And they don't have any money, and we still have to treat them. It's a big, big problem. But there's an even bigger problem with the migration issue. That is the number of criminals who are coming into the United States. I have been in Mexico traveling with the caravans down there. I've been walking with those guys, and I speak fluent Spanish. And so you get talking to these guys in the caravan and stuff, and I'll tell you what, in less than 5 minutes, I can find a felon in that crowd. It's nothing. I mean, there are many people in the crowd who have been to the United States already, who have committed felonies and have been deported and are on their way back to the United States again. If that doesn't make your head explode, I don't know what will. But the problem doesn't end there, because we're not just talking about people who have committed felonies in the United States and have been deported that are going to come back in and try to just get back in and pick up where they left off. Many of those people have families in the United States that they've been there for years, then they get caught for domestic abuse or robbery or drugs or whatever, and get caught, and put in jail. They do their time in jail, they get kicked out, they can't come back again, but they do. I mean, what are they going to do? Put you back in jail? In jail, they have to feed you 3 meals a day, and they have to give you a safe place to sleep, more or less. Let you work out now and then. You can watch television. I mean, compared to people's lives in some places around the world, that would be a vacation. And an American prison is much better than regular life in a lot of places. So they really don't care so much. But that's not even the bigger problem. The bigger problem is that many countries, including Cuba and Venezuela, Haiti, I could go on, are emptying out their prisons and are sending those prisoners to the United States because it's cheaper. Like, why should we pay to feed and house these people in our prisons when we can just send them to the U.S. and they're not our problem anymore? So there are many criminals, and I've talked to them personally, who are being shipped to the United States by their governments specifically because they are criminals and their government doesn't want to pay for them anymore. So they're just dumping them in the U.S. I have a feeling that when they carved those iconic words on the Statue of Liberty, give me your hunger, you're tired, you're oppressed, those yearning to be free, they weren't necessarily talking about all the countries of the world emptying out their prisons and sending us their prisoners. They probably weren't talking about those people. Thank you, Sherry. That's very kind of you. But that's still only the tip of the iceberg. There are cells of Hezbollah and Hamas terrorists that have been well known, well documented across Latin America, growing influence. Many of them, Venezuela is a real hotbed. I mean, a real hotbed for Hezbollah, especially. The former vice president of Venezuela is a Hezbollah operative. And it's not even a secret. The U.S. government knows it, and he's on watch lists and stuff, because this is the former vice president of Venezuela. Do you think Venezuela wouldn't be welcoming Hamas operatives in if their vice president is one of them? There is a very large Lebanese presence in Venezuela. Many people don't know that. There's a huge Lebanese diaspora inside Venezuela, and many of those people are friendly to Hamas. There are tons of business deals that benefit Hamas that are done in Latin America. They have this, it's not necessarily a scam, but it's a arbitrage scheme where they buy up used vehicles in Latin America that are, it's broke down. You get a used vehicle in Latin America, it's probably pretty well used. They buy them all up in Latin America. They ship them over to Africa, because in Africa, they'll take anything. I mean, a 50-year-old Lada is like, somebody's pride and joy. So they'll take them over there and they'll make them run for another 25 years over there. They don't care what it is. They'll put cars together from different continents and they'll make it work. In Africa, the stuff you see in Africa boggles the mind. But so they make money, excuse me, buying low and selling high in Africa, and the profits go to Hezbollah to support their operations. So there's a huge presence of these terror groups in Latin America. They have training camps down in the tri-border region with Uruguay and Paraguay and Argentina down there. They have Hamas and Hezbollah training camps down there. It is really only a matter of time before whatever they're training for comes to fruition. Now, what do you think are the chances that what they're training for has to do with the United States? Ask yourself that question. While I ask my lovely wife, could you please get me some tea, dear? I'm starting to lose my voice. She has so much fun answering questions in there, she forgets that I'm live out here. I'm dying here. She's like, calm down. So we have this huge issue with terror groups that are already active in Latin America, there's a nexus between international criminal organizations like MS-13 and Barrio 18 in El Salvador, like the different cartels across Mexico. These transnational criminal organizations are massive and very well funded, like a country. Did you know that in Colombia, for example, that the cartels there make more money on illegal gold mining than they do on cocaine? Illegal gold mining is like over $1 billion a year. And what they do is, if you go, I've done some reporting on this, it's really fascinating. You go to Colombia, and it's very mountainous, very remote country in many parts of the country. And you go up in those mountains, and there are mom and pop, what they call artisanal gold mines everywhere. Artisanal meaning just a mom and pop gold mine, where it's been a generational thing. They have a hole in the ground that's next to their house that they've been digging earth out of for a generation or more, and they pan it like the old time gold prospectors. They pan for gold, and sometimes they get a little more elaborate than that, but they make enough to live on, but not enough to get wealthy, right? They just get enough gold just to make it. But these cartels, they have a choice. They can sell it to the government, or they can sell it to the cartel. If they sell it to the government taxes them on their gold at a rate of 70%. So the government is a cartel in a manner of speaking. If the cartel only takes 50%, well, they're the preferred choice, and they won't kill your family. So a lot of people, the cartels come around, they collect up all that gold, and they're paying pennies on the dollar. They're not paying like market rates for this gold in any way, shape, or form. And then they process it and move it out of the country. And oh, by the way, gold is not illegal to carry. It's not illegal to own. It's not illegal to have in your car. They can't be sniffed out by dogs. So it's a much better product for them. Because they can make massive profit margins on it, selling it at market prices, and all they have to do is just maintain control over those areas out in the mountains. And then what they'll do is they'll come in and decide to get greedy, and they'll go to these mom and pop artisanal gold miners who, they work 8 hours a day in their mine. They just pan for gold, and it's a thing that, they've been doing for a long time. But the cartels will come in and say, we're going to upscale this a little bit. We've got this gigantic earth mover over here, and it's going to start digging a gigantic swath out of the river next to your house. And you're going to work for us. And now those people become essentially slave labor, work them to death in many cases. The way they separate the gold out from the mud that they're Their processing is with mercury, which they just put in their hand and they just, kind of do this. So they're touching this mercury all the time. It's making them sick. And all that mercury is getting flushed right down the river. It's making the fish sick and stuff. There are places in Colombia where if you fly over and look down, it looks like a moonscape down there because the cartels have enlisted the whole population out there to be illegal gold miners, and they're not content with just the people that are, taking it out of the streams. They are tearing up the whole environment to get at more gold and make more money. That gives them $1 billion a year, just those Colombian cartels. Then you add on top of that the drug trade going north to the United States. That's billions more a year. Then you add on top of that, I'm sorry, I said $1 billion a year from the gold. It's actually $4 billion a year from gold. Then you add on that the drug trade. Then you add on that, I think the drug trade in Colombia, when I was doing my reporting down there, was like 1.4 billion, and the gold was 4 billion. So there's 5.4 billion. And then you add on top of that the flow of human traffic that's going north to the United States. If you think that the cartels are not taking advantage of that, you're wrong. There is a large flow of people that are coming from around the world that want to get to the United States. And they can't fly to Mexico because of the visa restrictions. They won't let them on the plane in their home country because then the airline would get in trouble if they showed up in Mexico and didn't have a visa. So the only place they can go on journeying to the United States is Ecuador. Ecuador doesn't have any visa restrictions for anybody. You show up, you get in. And so people can come from anywhere in the world to Ecuador. Ecuador is just south of Colombia. So people fly to Ecuador, they get on a bus, they go to the river between Ecuador and Colombia, they cross, they go into Colombia, get on a bus, they drive across Colombia to the northern border of Colombia with Panama, which is the Darien Gap. If you don't know about the Darien Gap, you should look it up and read about it a little bit. But you are, the Darien Gap is it's like 47 miles of the most extreme topography on the planet. There's a swamp the size of Delaware in there. There's mountain ranges that are 1,400 feet high. They go from sea level to 1,400 feet and more and higher than that. But I mean, that's the passes that people have to go over. They're very, very extreme topography. Tons of rain. They get like 18 feet of rain a year, something along those lines. So the rainy season is just absolute deluges like you've never seen. They got bugs the size of your face. They got all sorts, everything in there wants to eat you or kill you, including the cartels and the bandits who live in there. And so it's a very unfriendly place. But the migrants have to go through there in order to get to the U.S. And so they get to the northern border of Colombia. They usually pay a smuggler some money not to rob them. That's called a vacuna, like a vaccination. And they follow that, they call it the trocha, at least the Venezuelans call it la trocha, which is like the path. And they start walking. It takes them 3.5 to 6 days on average to make it through the Darien Gap. And the reason there's a difference 3.5 to 6 is it depends on how much money you have. If you pay enough money, the smugglers will take you in a boat part of the way and you don't have to walk the whole thing. If you're broke, if you're destitute, like most of them are, then you have to walk the whole time and it's going to take you 6 days. And they just start humping through there. They bring their kids. I mean, it is nuts. So it's so dangerous. At one point, we were doing a lot of stuff down there, and we were estimating that 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 of the people who went in did not come out the other side. That there's that much death taking place. And this was at a time when we were talking about dozens of people a day were dying in the Gap. Because up to like hundreds up to maybe 1,000 a day were coming through at that time. Now, take a guess how many people are coming through the Darien Gap every day. Put your answer in the comments. How many people do you think are streaming through the Darien Gap? Again, walking 6 days, no food, there's no towns in there, there's no road, it's just mud, just a mud track. And again, walking 3 to 6 days, drinking water out of the nasty brackish streams and things like that. What do you got? Okay, so we got 25,000, 5,000, 600, 6,000, 14,000. Yeah, way too many is the answer. That's right. 500,000 a day? No, Lisa, come on. That's a little ridiculous. No, it went from when I first started reporting on the number of people coming through the Gap. That was about 2012. No, 2016, I guess, was when I first started reporting on that. And it was something like 37,000 a year coming through the Gap. And that was an absolute overwhelming catastrophe for Panama. 37,000 people a year were just, I mean, that was, they couldn't believe it. That's why I started reporting on it, because it was a huge, huge tragedy. Now, there's about 5,000 to 6,000 people a day coming through the Darien Gap. Now, the first place that they come to once they cross into Panama, again, after having walked for almost a week, some of them get lost out there and spend weeks wandering around until they find their way out. Some of them, like I said, don't ever find their way out. But they come into Panama. The first place they run into is an Indian village. There are 9 different tribes of Indians in, indigenous people in Panama. And this one in particular is called the Embera, and they typically live like they did 500 years ago. In many of their villages, they run around in loincloths, women go topless, they decorate their bodies up with tattoos and all this stuff, and they have dugout canoes. They live in these, thatch huts that are set up off the ground, on stilts to keep the bugs away. And they live very primitive lives. Well, the first village you come to way out in the jungle is called Bajo Chiquito. That's one of them that they come to. And it's about 400 people. It is, they don't have any running water. They don't have any electricity out there. It's a legit, very primitive Indian village, or at least it was. Now, this village of 400 people with no running water, they got their water from the river. That's what they drank, because they were the first village. There was nobody else upstream from them, and so they drank out of the river. They were fine with that. Now, there's 4,000 or 5,000 migrants a day traipsing into their village, a village of 400 people. And to say that they're overwhelmed is the understatement of the year. It's an absolute humanitarian nightmare in there. I've been in there many times, and the last time was just a couple of months ago. And the Indians in there are, absolutely disgusted. They can't believe what they're seeing. And so to the point where many of the young men have been like, we're going to rob these people because they're just invading our territory. We're just going to rob them, rape them, maybe even kill them. And there's a lot of the people who are, almost everybody who goes through the Gap gets robbed, almost every single person. Many of the people robbing them are Indians, and maybe many of them are cartel, and some just bandits that live out there. Any halfway decent looking young lady from the ages of about 12 to 40 is going to get raped. It's very, very common out there, and there's a lot of killings as well. Just they'll say, give us your stuff, and the guys go, I don't want to, and they'll go, pow, and just kill them. And then everybody else gives them their stuff. When they get to the village, they find their stuff for sale. Again, in the village, they can buy their stuff back from the village if they want to. This is it's absolutely crazy. GA says, question. Let me take a couple questions on that subject. I know I'm covering a lot of ground here, but a lot of people don't understand just how bad this issue has gotten. Maybe it's because you've been hearing about it for a long time and you really, haven't paid that much attention to the details, and so it's kind of a background noise at this point. But it has continued to get worse and worse and worse to the point where it is literally going to cause a collapse in our country of many of our social welfare systems. And not just talking about entitlements, I'm talking about your local hospital. There are hospitals that are going broke because of this. And so, okay, so Bonnie says, I saw the Chinese men are coming to join our military and become citizens. I was getting to that. The last trip I took out there to the jungle, it had been for a while mostly Cubans, then for a while it was mostly Haitians, then for a while it was mostly Venezuelans, and now massive numbers of Chinese people. And there's a difference. The Cubans, Haitians, and Venezuelans were all destitute people, the poorest of the poor, because in their countries, the wealthy people and even the middle class people, anybody who could get out, got out long ago. Anybody who had money to leave those countries, left those countries a long time, years and years ago. The people that are leaving now are the poorest of the poor. And they have no money, they have nowhere else to go. And so it's like, why not traipse for 6 days through the worst jungle on the planet and risk death for me and my children? Because if I get to the promised land in America, they pay for everything. It's socialism like they promised us it would be in Cuba and Venezuela, but it didn't work out in Cuba and Venezuela, so we must have done it wrong. They're doing socialism right in the United States. You get there, man, they pay for everything. It's great. I'm not kidding. I've had people tell me this. It was the poorest of the poor. But now, this massive numbers of Chinese people coming through the Darien Gap, and they're not poor. They got money. They'll come and say, can you change dollars? I need Panamanian money. And you're like, well, it is dollars. Oh, okay, good. They come in and they say, okay, will you take Chinese money? They want, you go to the stores there, these people will come in and change $35,000 worth of their currency. I mean, they've got money, but they have to come this way because visa-wise, they can't just fly into any place. And the crazy thing about it is they didn't just escape from China and, a couple days later they're in Panama coming through the Darien Gap. China had to let them leave. You can't just leave China. You've got to get permission from your government. That means that the government of China is giving these people permission and indeed, in many cases, sending them to the United States. Now, I went back and I found a leaked speech that was given by a Chinese general several years back that talked about this specific issue. One of the ways that China is going to become a world power and take over the world is by salting our people throughout the globe and eventually taking over. Specifically in the West, specifically in the United States. It is part of our military plan to take over the United States by sending our people there as migrants, not with a rifle, but with a woman and a child. And so we will take over their country. Instead of with weapons, we will take over their country with migrants. We have been able to, as me and some of my fellow journalists have been doing research on this topic and have been literally gone down and lived down in the Darien Gap for some time. My friend Michael Yon has done a tremendous amount of work on this. and have followed I've followed almost every step of the path from Ecuador all the way to the U.S. southern border. I've covered it in in many countries around the world, but especially in the Western Hemisphere. So I know what I'm talking about because I've followed this train all the way up to the U.S. And what we are seeing is we have found some of these Chinese people. Some of them are just, salesmen and not farmers per se, but mostly like professional class people that are coming. They got plenty of money. But what we're seeing is salted in with those people are very fit young men. They're very serious. And those guys won't let you take their picture. Most of the Chinese people are like, hey, can we get a selfie? They love it. But some of them are not just, no, please don't take my picture. They're like hostile. They're like, I will kill you if you take my picture. And we've done research on these people and figured out that some of these guys are literally active duty members of the PLA, of the People's Liberation Army in China, that are being sent over. I believe specifically the ones that we met were sent over to facilitate the movement of Chinese people up through the southern border into the United States. All the way through, because they seem to be like almost like the tour guides. They'd be like, come on people, come on, we're leaving. Don't let that guy take your picture, that kind of thing. But without a doubt, there is something very sinister afoot by China in these migration flows. And look, if you've been listening to me since the 7th of October or so, then you know enough about me to know that I'm not just going to go off half-cocked on some kind of conspiracy theory. I despise conspiracy theories, and I will call them out. You've heard me call them out. This is not a conspiracy theory, folks. I've been covering this for years, and I'm telling you, there is something really going on here, more than meets the eye, with the number of migrants that are coming in from China. If you want to see some of my reporting on this, just go back and look through my hot zone. Go look through some of the recent reporting that I've done on that, and you can see interviews with some of these people. I've interviewed Chinese people. I've talked to them. I've ridden in the canoes with them. I've ridden in the boat with them going across from the Colombian side to the trailhead. It is a really big deal. Now, if you have not subscribed to my podcast and you're listening to these things every day, why? I look at the analytics and there's a lot of people that watch every day that haven't subscribed. It would be a huge favor to me. It really would be helpful if you just go hit that button down there that says subscribe. They're not going to, give your passwords away or go, chase you down in the mall or, whatever. They're just going to alert you whenever I go live. And you can catch these things live if you like. So let me answer a few questions, and thought you said yesterday you were going into Gaza today with the troops. No, I said it might be as soon as today, but I did not get the call today, but it is getting close. I did talk to them. They called me yesterday or this morning and said, we need your phone number because we're going to have to call you and you need to be ready to leave at a moment's notice to come down here. So I may actually go into Gaza at some time over the weekend or this coming week. Please God, I've only got a few more days left here and I'd really love to get into Gaza. Please give me the help by subscribing down there. It's easy to do and it really does help. From what I understand, the Chinese people released are to answer to China and are to do what they are told when they arrive at their destination. That is true. China does not recognize that if you're in America, you're no longer subject to Chinese law. Under Chinese law, it doesn't matter where you are subject to Chinese law, and they will, we found Chinese police stations in the United States, in Canada, many countries around the world. The Chinese have covert police stations to police the Chinese people in that country. I'm virtually certain that there are police stations in China because there are a lot of Chinese people there, but I haven't found them, but I'm going to go looking for them. And I bet we can find them if we try. So yes, the Chinese people know that they are beholden to China. Yeah, it is an answer to prayer, Ronnie. Thank you. Okay, so I am trying to get into Gaza for sure. Good, Shauna, let's get this to 100,000 on YouTube. I don't care about the placket, but it actually does really help with the algorithm, and because YouTube will then show my live videos to people that have never seen them before. So we can get the word out about the stuff I'm talking about, and that is super important. And again, if we're trying to help people, we can raise a lot more money with 100,000 people than we can with 50,000 people. And when we do that, we're able to help more people. Again, the motto of this thing, the reason I started this podcast 4 years ago, and I've been cranking away on this thing, we've got over 1,000 videos online, is because I really want to give people the opportunity not just to hear the news, but to change the news, to make the news better for the people that are being affected by wars and disasters around the world. It's so depressing to watch the mainstream media and to watch all the terrible things that are happening in the world and not to be able to do anything about them. But in this medium, we can use this technology to leverage your generosity and help the people on the ground, and you'll know right where your money is going. So if you go watch last episode, last night we went across the street and they had their Hanukkah celebration, and we gave out $2,500 worth of gifts to the kids over there, 12 and under, and blew them away. They were so amazed. And I had somebody write me today and say, I'm Jewish, but you're making me want to be a Christian because of all the great things you're doing for people around the world. I love that. I love that. I also had somebody say, it's really offensive to me that you keep talking about Christianity. And I was like, well, A, it's my podcast. B, you need to understand where a Christian is coming from. As a Christian, my belief, my heartfelt belief is that Jesus is the only way that you can spend eternity in heaven. And so don't take it personally if you hear me talking about Jesus and praying to Jesus, and hopefully you will want to have what I have, that is a relationship with Jesus, because you might not believe that. You might not believe Jesus is real. That's okay. But I do. And if I do, and I'm saying, I'm praying to the God that I believe in, take it as it's meant. I'm not praying curses on you. I'm praying that the God of the universe would bless you, would give you eternal life, would give you what I have, the confidence and clarity that I have in my worldview. I'm praying that you would have that too. So even if you don't believe in it, even if you think it's bunk, take it in the spirit that it was given. I'm wishing the absolute best possible thing for you that I could wish for you. Take it in that spirit. And if you're Jewish, I love you. I love you. But again, don't get offended if I'm talking about Jesus and I'm hoping that you will get to know him like I do. Because even if he's not real, the spirit that I am talking in is the spirit of love, is a spirit of, I want you to have the peace that passes all understanding, the fearlessness that I feel because I know where I'm going. That's all. Just take it in that spirit. And if you don't believe in it, that's up to you. That's fine. I hope that you would wish the same for me to the God that you do believe in. Okay. How can we protect ourselves in the U.S.? One tired mama? That's a really good question. We did a whole podcast on that about a week ago with Tim Miller. So if you go back, look back through my podcast, you can find that with Tim Miller, or you can go and follow Tim Miller yourself here on YouTube. That's the Real Security Podcast. I'm not trying to keep everybody for myself. I'm trying to get the word out because Tim Miller's stuff really is good and it really could save your life, okay? So do you see, yeah, 60,000 would be amazing. Do you see how close we are to 60,000? If we just got a few more subscribers, we'd be at 60,000. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. That's right, the Real Security Podcast with Tim Miller. Thank you very much. So, anybody else have any? Let's see if I got any more questions here. Connie's yelling at me. Hang on a second. What? Did you say something, hon?
I'm not yelling at you.
Oh, I thought you were. Sorry. Did you see any questions go by that I missed, babe?
Just give an Israel update.
Okay, so another quick Israel update, folks. They captured a whole bunch of Hamas prisoners in Gaza. The IDF did yesterday, and I put the video of that up on my locals page, so you can go subscribe over on locals. Just go to chuckholton.com; it'll take you over there, and you can see this hundreds of IDF, hundreds of Hamas prisoners taken by the IDF inside Gaza. They have been gleaning a lot of intel from those guys. Those guys are apparently singing like canaries, and they're using that intel very, very effectively to take out important sites. But today, Hamas, it almost felt like the grand finale at the end of the 4th of July fireworks or something, because we had a lot of rockets coming in today into Israel, a lot coming out of Gaza. And it's like, man, how are they still fighting? How are they still shooting rockets when the IDF is like all over Gaza? They've got drones, they've got planes, they've got, jet fighters, everything circling over Gaza all the time, and somehow they still manage to shoot rockets off without getting liquidated in the process. They do get liquidated in very short order after they shoot the rockets, but they're still shooting them. And probably 100 rockets came out of Gaza today into central Israel. I actually heard the explosions of the Iron Dome system taking some of them out all the way over here. So some of them were much closer than Tel Aviv. They were far away, probably 30 miles away, but I did hear the explosions. There were also quite a few rockets that came out of Lebanon today, and the IDF, again, playing ping pong with missiles back and forth with what's the Hezbollah guys. I tell you what, the IDF is this close to going into Lebanon, to actually invading Lebanon to kill the Hezbollah. They've got a ton of troops up there. The IDF's got probably 150,000 troops on the border up there, and they're ready to cross that border into Lebanon anytime. So this may expand in the coming week if Hezbollah doesn't knock it off. And they've made that very clear. In Gaza, I was talking about this on the other live that I did, they had a really close call where the Hamas managed to tunnel under one of their rear camps where they would go to rest inside Gaza. The IDF had this camp set up. They had a bunch of equipment set around, and they had tents pitched, and they had equipment laying around everywhere. And Hamas put out a video of a camera coming whoop up out of the ground and looking around like a periscope, and literally it was like 10 feet away from some IDF soldiers standing around smoking and joking, laying in a hammock, looking at their phones, whatever, because they're in a rear area. They're not supposed to be in a combat zone, but they managed to tunnel under this camp, come right up in the middle of the camp, and they published that video before they did anything about it. So the intelligence from the IDF saw the video and called that camp and said, very quickly, but very quietly, walk out of the camp, leave right now, leave all your stuff behind, pretend you're just going to the bathroom, and off you go, and then watch the camp very closely. So they left the camp, they set up a perimeter around the camp and just watched it, left all their stuff there. And after it got dark that night, they saw a guy pop out of the ground and go into one of the tents, and they lit him up. They started shooting at him, and he detonated. He spontaneously combusted because he was a suicide bomber, blew up, And when he blew up, it caused what's called a sympathetic detonation with a massive amount of explosives that had been packed into the tunnel underneath the camp. And it blew that camp to kingdom come, man. I mean, it was a massive explosion, according to guys who were there. Just vaporized all that equipment. I mean, we're not talking about tanks and stuff, but we're talking about, you know, the guys' backpacks and some of their tents and things. You know, the porta potties went to the moon. There's probably still pieces of equipment raining down from that explosion. It was like enormous. It was huge. Reminded me of that time that my son killed a big snapping turtle in our pond, and he put it out in the back field and put 5 pounds of tannerite under it and then shot it. And it just, we called it the inaugural flight of the Holton space program. I mean, it just went and fired that turtle up into the air. We just found little pieces of him everywhere. How did I get on talking about turtles? Okay, so this camp in Gaza, thank God nobody was killed, but it vaporized the whole camp, and it certainly has made the IDF start to think twice about where they put their camps and how they set them up and everything like that. It also showed that Hamas is still a viable force, and so they are weakening them for sure. They are taking out a lot of their equipment and materiel. The flooding of the tunnels was effective, and I believe they are still flooding the tunnels. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything more about that. Only that by flooding the tunnels, they caused all of these guys to come out of the tunnels that they then captured yesterday. And that's where all these guys came from. That's why they say we're considering all of these military-age males who came out of the flooded tunnels to be Hamas fighters. And the UN and everybody's on Twitter saying, oh, those were school teachers and florists and choir boys. And, you know, yeah, but they were down in the terror tunnels and with all the terrorists, so they're all being considered to be terrorists. Israel then put them all in trucks and took them out to a camp outside of Gaza and to make them safe under the Geneva Convention. Do you think U.S. and France will assist with removing Hezbollah from the south of Lebanon to force compliance with Resolution 1701? Matt, I kind of don't think so. I think that if anything, what they would do is what they have done in Gaza, which is to provide signals intelligence to the Israelis. You know, we have a large SIGINT capability offshore now. Maybe if things went really badly, the United States would do some air strikes or something like that. The chances of us putting Marines on the ground is beyond remote. There's not the political will for that, but you know, we would help in ways that wouldn't require putting American troops at risk. Let's see. Well, the turtle was already dead when he blew it up. That's okay. Those snapping turtles will eat our fish, and I pay good money to stock those ponds with fish, so I don't want the turtles there. What will it take for things to change, Cindy F. says? To change is Latin countries so that people can have better lives in their countries and not always seek to leave. Well, there's push factors and there's pull factors, Cindy. And the pull factor is greater than the push factor. There are many people who are leaving decent jobs in these countries that don't necessarily, they're not starving to death. They're not destitute. And a large number of the people who are coming from countries where they were destitute, like Venezuela, Cuba, and Haiti, they're not coming directly from Venezuela, Cuba, and Haiti. They're coming from Brazil or from Ecuador or from Chile because they've been working in those countries for 5 to 7 years. And in those countries, they were making a decent living. But they're coming to the United States now because they can make even more money in the United States and get all the free stuff. I want to tell you the story about, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about a couple that I met from Cuba. this is several years ago. I was in one of my first trips to the Darien Gap to report on the migration crisis, and we were down there, and there were Cubans that were just stepping out of the jungle, and they were in really bad shape. They had bad trench foot, they had prickly heat, they had open sores on their bodies and bug bites and all sorts of stuff, sunburn and you name it. So we were actually like, these people are going to die, so we were helping the people as best we could, and I'm not going to help them get to the United States, but if they're about to die, I'll bandage them up or try to get them some water, help treat their heat stroke or something like that. And so this couple had really bad trench foot, and so we were treating their feet, me and my nephew Jake. And we got talking to them, and they said they were two school teachers who had left Cuba. Between the two of them in Cuba, they made $45 a month. On the local economy in Cuba, you can survive on that, but you're poor. But everybody's poor in Cuba, so that's what socialism does. Is it makes everybody equally poor, and so they went from $45 a month. They came through the Darien Gap, and I said, "Well, here's my phone number. Would you please text me as you move north, because I'd like to track the route that you take?" And they said, "Sure." So they did. They tracked. Kept sending me messages on WhatsApp all the way up until they got to the U.S. When they got to the United States, I just so happened to be in Dallas at my mom's house, and they texted me and said, "We just made it into the U.S. We're in El Paso." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. What are you doing next?" They said, "We're taking a bus to Dallas." And I said, "Well, I'm in Dallas. Let's get together for lunch." So they got on a bus and they came to Dallas. I met them, and I wanted to hear the rest of their story. So we sat down over a plate of food, and they said, they told me how the trip was, and they got robbed several times, and it was difficult, blah, blah, blah. And then they said, "Well, hey, can you run us by this church over here real quick? Can you just give us a ride over here to this church?" And I was like, "Okay, sure. Yeah, what do you need?" They said, "Well, there's a program. We're on a WhatsApp group with all the other migrants, and so we pass information along when we find out ways that you can survive out here." So they said, this church over here has a program where they'll give you a stipend every month for the first 24 months that you're in the United States in Texas to help you get on your feet. And I'm like, it kind of sounded like it was a city program that was administered by the church. I wasn't positive about that at the time, but anyway, so I was like, okay, so we went there. And they got out of the car, but they didn't go in the door together. Like, one went in and the other one stood around outside. I said, "Aren't you going to go inside?" "Yeah, I'm going to wait for her to go in and be there for a while, and then I'm going to go in separate." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because if we go in together, we get one stipend. But if we go in as two separate people, we get two stipends." Like, they knew how to game the system. So then he went in, he got his stipend, got all signed up. Then they said, "Can you take us to the bus stop?" And so I was like, okay, so we'd go to the bus stop and put him on. Wait, did we put him on a bus? We didn't put him on the bus, did we? No, they came. No, we were going that direction. They said, did we put him on? Okay, anyway, we ended up putting him on the bus for Florida. And yeah, that's right. I took him to the bus station, put him on the bus. They went to Florida. Apparently, there's a similar program to the one they signed up in Texas for people that are living in Florida. So they didn't tell anybody that they had left Texas, so they continued to get that money given to them. They signed up for a similar program in Florida, started getting money sent to them by this NGO, and they signed up for SNAP benefits and that sort of thing, like under a federal welfare program, and started getting money from the federal program. So within a couple of months of getting to the United States, these people were making $3,200 a month from these programs they had signed up for, gaming the system. And they really only qualified for one of those programs, but in effect, they signed up for 6 because they signed up as 2 separate people instead of a couple for 3 different programs. So they're making $3,200 a month of taxpayer money and donor money that was being given to them. Then, if you get a job and you're getting those federal welfare benefits and stuff, then you're not eligible for those things anymore. So if you get a job, you lose your benefits. But they know they go get a job under the table for cash, making 15 bucks an hour and don't tell them, the people at the program, that they're doing that. And so they managed to make money working and getting money from these programs for 2 years. I went back and visited them in Miami after a year. She was pregnant with her first baby, anchor baby. They were making 60 grand a year. About half of it was from the different programs. They had a nice little apartment and a car, or maybe even 2 cars, I don't remember. They were doing great. And they were sending money back to Cuba for their relatives so that their relatives could come up and do the same thing. If that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what will. It doesn't actually make me angry at the migrants, although they are being disingenuous and dishonest by gaming the system like that. But look, if somebody's handing out cookies, don't blame me for getting in line, because I like cookies. And if the United States is going to just hand out money to people who are here illegally, whether it's through an NGO or a church or a federal program, don't blame the people who come up here to get in line. That is the do you understand? To go from $45 a month to 60 grand a year in a year's time is like winning the lottery for these people over and over and over again. And listen, you might call that the American dream. It's not the American dream. The American dream was never to come to the United States and have the US taxpayers give you money for free. That wasn't the American dream. That's the American nightmare for any American. Okay, it might be the dream for these illegals, but it's not a dream for us. You know, when I write that massive check every year to the federal government, I think about that couple. And I mean, they're nice folks. I keep in touch with them from time to time, but it sure doesn't make me happy that a lot of my tax dollars are going not just to pay those people, but to encourage more of them to come and take advantage of us. That pull factor is stronger than any push factor in anywhere in the world except for places like perhaps Syria, Somalia, Ghana, places like that. But anywhere in Latin America, those people could come and make a good life. Do you understand? If a person comes from Somalia, yeah, Somalia is a failed state. It's very, very bad. There's no place that you'd like to live in Somalia. I've been to Somalia a couple times, and I'm telling you, it's bad. But those people have to travel through a dozen countries, any one of which is safer and more prosperous than Somalia, where they could get asylum and they could make a life and be just fine if they were willing to work for it like everybody else. But they don't stop in any of those dozen or so countries. They come to the United States, and you have to ask yourself why. So maybe it is bad where they live, and there is a push factor that's pushing them out of their country. But why do they then travel through a dozen safe countries to get to America? The reason is the pull factor. And the pull factor is all the free stuff that they can get. You, as a normal American, might not even understand that all of these things are available. You might not have ever heard of these programs that they can sign up for and get $3,200 a month. You might be like, where do I sign up for that? And that's by design. These people all know how to game the system because they've listened to each other, just like the hobos used to do during the Great Depression. If they went through a town and they found a family that was generous and would feed you a meal, they would take a piece of coal out of their pocket and they'd put a mark on the mailbox or the curb or something. They'd put a little mark there to let the other hobos that came along behind them know this is a place you can get a meal. Well, there's a high-tech version of that with WhatsApp that goes on today with these migrants. And I'm on some of these WhatsApp groups and I see it, okay? And so when the word got out, when Joe Biden got voted into office, that the border was wide open and people were welcome to come, it opened the floodgates to an extent that we have never ever seen in America. And one of the other things think about this. There are about 3 million Americans who are leaving the United States every year, American citizens who are moving overseas, expatriating to somewhere. A lot of them go to Mexico, the majority, over 1 million, go to Mexico every year. But 3 million people a year leaving the United States. Do you think those people are destitute, or do you think that they're people who have money? I would submit to you they're people who have money. I was one of them 10 years ago. The people who are replacing them in the United States are people who are coming into the U.S. illegally, who are destitute, but who know when they get here how to game the system to suck as much resources out of the United States as humanly possible. And they will work. I'm not saying that none of them want to work. They will work, but they'll work while they are getting all these programs that are designed for people who aren't working. And that will be the downfall of America, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, that and the low birth rate. Okay, who's the family you took a selfie with in the thumbnail in this live? It's a Chinese family that I met just as they came out of the Darien Gap into Bajo Chiquito. They were camping on the shore of the river. This is the craziest thing. These 400 Indians that live in this village of Bajo Chiquito, it's a 3.5-hour ride in a dugout canoe up the river to get to their village. They're the first village that people come to when they step out of the jungle. And when they do, again, the 400 people that live in that village, they don't have a well. They used to just drink out of the river. But they can't do that now because there are so many dead bodies upstream of the migrants who drown as they try to cross those rivers, that it has tainted the water of the river all the way down. They can't drink it anymore. They get sick. So now they have to import, get this, they have to import bottled water from Panama City 3 hours upriver into the pristine virgin triple canopy rainforest of the Darien Gap to Indian villages so that they can have stuff to drink. And they have to pay for water in a place that gets 18 feet of rain a year. I mean, if that doesn't set your brain on fire, I just don't know what will. I don't know what will. I'm going to have to go here pretty quick, folks. I got more work to do tonight, but let's see if you got any last questions. If you have comments you want to give me and you want to get a hold of me, just send me an email, hotzoneholton@gmail.com, or you can leave comments here. That was a good question, though. Let's get to 750 likes. Ronnie and Jeff, man, I love those guys. You guys, you need a commission or something. Free education, medical treatment, grants. And we got a lot of people watching that are not from the United States. Maybe you didn't understand that about the U.S. We get criticized by people in Europe and Canada for not having a socialized medical system. Well, it is actually a socialized medical system for anybody who is destitute and can't afford to pay, because we have to treat them if they show up. They get free medical care. And it happens to be a much higher quality medical care than most places that have a medical system that is truly socialized. I was interviewing the head of surgery at a hospital in Havana, Cuba, on one trip down there when I was doing some reporting down there. And this is during the Obama administration. And I said, they're talking about going to a socialized medicine in the United States. And you live in a socialized system. You've grown up in that, you live in that, you work in a socialized, you're a surgeon for a socialized medical system. What do you have to say to Americans about going to socialized medicine? And he said, 2 words, you're screwed. That was literally what he said to me. Our system is definitely broken, like really broken, but I'm glad it's not socialized, because it'd be even more broken if it was. Panama has a pretty good system, actually. They've got a 2-tiered system. They have a socialized system that's funded by the canal, and where people can go and they can get, they still have to pay, but it's very cheap, and usually their employer has to pay whatever the cost is. But it's super cheap. Like open heart surgery is like, $5,000 or $10,000 or something. Super cheap. But then they have a private medical care system that you can pay to get very high quality medical care, but there's no tort law like there's in the States, where like if the doctor treats you and your leg still falls off or something, you can sue him for $900 million and be rich for the rest of your life. They don't have that there. So you don't have to buy off the lawyers to get to the private medical care system. And so it's much less expensive. It's about 1/10 the cost of the similar care in the United States, but the quality is about the same. And we like it. We like it a lot. Connie has like a full coverage health insurance in Panama that covers her inside Panama and around the world. And it's how much you pay for yours?
$2,900 a year.
Like $2,900 a year, which we were going to have to spend like $1,700 a month on our family under Obamacare. So it's super cheap. All right, 800 likes. Hey, I much rather have the subscriptions than the likes, but if you're going to do one or the other, do a subscription, but please do both. Thank you very much. Folks, I'm going to have to run. Love you guys, and I'm really, really appreciative. How are the prices in Panama? Low or high? Higher than the U.S.? The prices in Panama depend on what you are buying. If it's anything that's labor intensive, it's going to be cheaper than the U.S. because we don't have all of the insane requirements for hiring people and OSHA and all that kind of stuff. Unions and things like that. So it can be quite a bit cheaper if you're hiring a guy to mow your lawn or something like that. But it can be quite a bit more expensive if you want to buy cereal, because that has to be imported from the United States, and it can't. You're not eating on the local economy then. Excuse me, just one second. This is it. Hey, Flavia, I'm on a live. Can I call you back in 5 minutes?
Perfect.
Okay, bye. We'll see you. Okay. She keeps calling me and calling me and calling me, so she apparently didn't know I was busy. So I appreciate all you guys. Let me pray, and we will go. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for keeping us safe while we're here. We've been here now for a couple of months, and I've been all over this country, and I've just seen your hand at work everywhere I go. And so thank you for being such a powerful God that I can go wherever and I don't have to be afraid. I can thank you for being a God that makes your will clear to me in the way that you orchestrate the events of my life, the way that you work out the people that I meet and the things that happen and the doors that open and close. And I thank you for every one of those. Thank you for my children being able to come here, Nathan and Rubina. And I just pray that we'd make great memories while they're here and have a wonderful kind of early Christmas. I'm so grateful that you've allowed us to do that, and that I can still work even in the process while I'm here. Thank you for all the people who are watching. We know everybody has their own battle that they're fighting, and thank you that you know what each of those battles is. And I pray that you would make yourself so real to every one of my viewers right now today, that they would just have something happen that just goes, wow, that had to be God. The way that you do in my life, I pray that you do for each one of them. And as you make yourself real to them, I pray that they would get to know you better and better. Thank you for even the hardship that you bring into my life, so that I have to get to know you better, because I need you that much more. God, you are such a good God, and we're just so grateful for that. We pray for Israel, pray for the peace of this country. We pray your blessing on this country during Hanukkah. And we pray, Lord, that Israel itself would cry out to you, and that you would hear them, and that they would know you better as their God. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, folks, thanks again. And please subscribe. When we're done, you can still subscribe. That would be very helpful. I know you didn't want to miss a word, so you can go do that now. And we'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.